Get ready, because on April 1st, 2026, the entire rule book that has governed India's income tax for over 60 years is getting a complete rewrite. And I'm not talking about a few small tweaks here and there. This is a ground-up overhaul. So let's break down what this massive change is going to mean for you and your wallet.
I mean, just think about that for a second. The Income Tax Act of 1961, that's been around since before the Beatles even put out their first album. It's seen India go through this incredible transformation, right? And now, it's finally heading for retirement. This is a truly monumental shift, and we are going to get into exactly what's changing.
So, let's kick things off with the big picture. The old 1961 Act is officially out, making way for the brand new Income Tax Act of 2025. But this isn't just about swapping some pages. It's about a whole new way of thinking, moving from a system that kind of defaults to suspicion to one that's built on simplification and trust.
And the sheer scale of this change is just wow. The new act is literally half the size of the old one. We're talking about slashing the word count from over 5 lakh words down to just 2.5 lakh and chopping the number of sections from 819 down to 536. The best way to think about it is like upgrading your computer from some clunky, ancient operating system to a brand new, super fast one. The whole point is to make it quicker, clearer, and way more efficient.
Okay, so here's the game plan for today. First, we're going to look at this new, simpler rulebook. Then, we'll dive into the specifics, what this means for all you salaried folks, for investors, and for anyone spending money overseas. And finally, we'll wrap it all up with the one key thing you really need to remember.
So let's really dig into that new philosophy. Look, the government isn't just cutting words just to make the book look thinner. The real idea here is to build a tax system that's actually based on trust and simplicity, instead of one that feels like it's built on complexity and suspicion.
And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This quote from PwC just nails it. They call it a decisive shift toward a more certain, simplified, and technology-enabled tax regime. At the end of the day, this is all about making things less stressful for both businesses and for you, the individual taxpayer.
Oh man, this might be the single biggest simplification, and it's a game changer. Say goodbye to the super confusing terms previous year and assessment year, gone. Now there's just one simple, intuitive term, tax year. So the tax year 2026-27 is the period you earn the money and the period it gets assessed. It just makes sense, right? No more mental gymnastics.
And the cleanup goes way deeper than that. The new law gets rid of all that old-timey legal jargon and uses plain, direct language. Plus, it removes over 1,000 of those complicated exceptions and explanations. Even the form numbers are getting a makeover to be more logical. So, yeah, get ready to say goodbye to Form 16. Your new salary certificate is going to be Form 130.
All right, so that's the big picture stuff. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What does this new rulebook actually mean for you if you're a salaried person? How is this going to hit your monthly paycheck and your tax filing?
Okay, for anyone out there with kids, you're going to want to listen to this. The allowances for children's education and hostel expenses, which, by the way, are still part of the old tax regime, are getting a massive, much-needed boost. The education allowance, for example, is jumping from a measly 100 rupees a month to 3,000 rupees a month per child. Huge.
Yep, you are seeing that correctly. A 30-fold increase. This isn't some tiny adjustment. This is a massive relief that finally brings these ancient limits in line with what it actually costs to educate a child today.
Renters, there's good news for you too. That higher 50% house rental allowance exemption, which used to just be for the 4 big metros, is now being extended to Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, and Ahmedabad. But there's a little catch. There's a new compliance rule. You're now going to have to declare what your relationship is with your landlord. It's a pretty clear move to cut down on people making fake claims.
Okay, let's pivot now and talk about the world of investing. The new rules are bringing some really important changes for traders and long-term investors. So let's see what's what. So for anybody who trades in the futures and options market, listen up. The cost of doing business is about to go up a bit. The Securities Transaction Tax, or STT, is being increased on the sale of both futures and options. The idea here is to make that high-frequency, speculative type of trading just a little more expensive. So, why the hike? Well, the goal is pretty clear: to put the brakes on excessive speculation. This change comes right after a SEBI study showed that retail investors lost an absolutely staggering amount of money in the derivatives market in a single year. So this tax is basically a nudge, trying to push people towards more stable, long-term ways of investing.
There's also a really important change for sovereign gold bonds. Now, if you subscribe to SGBs when they were first issued and you hold on to them until they mature, your gains are still tax-free. Great. However, if you bought those exact same bonds from someone else on the secondary market, that tax-free party is over. You'll now have to pay capital gains tax on them.
All right, let's move on to our last major area, spending money overseas. And for anyone planning to study abroad, travel, or send money for medical reasons, well, there's some very, very welcome news here.
The government is basically taking a sledgehammer to the tax collected at source, or TCS, on these key overseas payments. And the numbers here are pretty dramatic. For tour packages, the rate is plummeting to a flat 2%, all the way down from a high of 20%. And for education and medical expenses, it's dropping from 5% to 2%. This is direct, immediate cash flow relief for a lot of middle-class families.
So after looking at all these little details for salaried folks, for investors, for travelers, what's the big idea here? What's the common thread that ties all this together?
This right here really brings the whole strategy into focus. The new tax code is built on 4 main pillars. 1. A radical shift to simplification. 2. Building a tax system that's actually based on trust. 3. Going all in on a digital-first approach. And 4. Giving targeted relief where it's needed most instead of just broad, sweeping tax cuts for everyone.
Which really leaves us with one final crucial question. If the rules of the game are easier to understand and the system is built on trust, will more people just do the right thing? Will they pay their taxes correctly and on time without having to be chased? That is the ultimate test of whether these reforms actually work.
Hey, if this breakdown helped you make sense of the new tax code, do me a favor and hit that like button. And please share this with anyone you think needs to see it. And of course, if you haven't already, subscribe for more deep dives into the topics that really matter. And of course, if you have any questions at all about this new tax code, or if you have ideas for what we should explain next, please drop them in the comments below. We read every single one. Thanks so much for watching.